stress. We just heard quite a bit about some of the causes, some of the effect. Heard about anxiety, some of the ways we use self-care. But in essence, what is the difference between the two? We often hear them used interchangeably. We hear stress and anxiety usually kind of used in interchangeable ways. What is your assessment on the difference between stress and anxiety? Yes.
I see anxiety as the mental worry that is basically is all of anxiety. It's the mental energy and processes you put forward if you're worrying about something or thinking about something. And then you have something like stress, which is more of the physiological symptoms that come with it. So that's because I'm worrying about it, I have muscle tension. Because I'm worrying about it, I have hypertension. And they're kind of almost split along the lines of psychological and physical, but the lines blur.
All right, good. So Will says that stress is more the physiological symptoms expressed by events of some kind, right? Whereas we can say anxiety is really a state of mind that causes us to feel certain ways over long periods of time. State of being almost, right? It usually is anticipatory, meaning that we are expecting something negative to happen. So think of what stress first. We'll start with stress, right? Most sentient beings experience stress for survival reasons. So stress may not be a bad thing. It is a natural thing, right? We say between homeostatic balance, it can either be positive or negative. Positive is I'm feeling too pent up, too much energy pent up. I feel like I need to release it. It needs to be responded to. On the negative side of homeostatic balance, we say I feel very low and I'm giving up. Because the event that I've praised is so dire that I don't feel I can do anything about it. Therefore, I have a physiological response of either being very anxious, blood pressure increase, heart rate increase. We say those goes with both the sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system. So it's something that's there for us to survive, right? We use it for survival mechanisms. We think of any wild animal, right? A lion out in the savannah in Africa, if it has not eaten for, say, a week or so, it is stressed out to the point to where it has to gain a ton of energy to react in order to go back to hunt, because it knows it's either going to live by the end of the night or die if it doesn't catch us what it needs to do. So therefore, it will be stressed to respond in some way for its own survival. We think of anxiety as something a little bit more long-term. It's a state of being or condition that makes you feel that something is impending doom, right? You say you don't know because none of us can predict the future, but you're still ruminating, you're repeating, you're compulsive about anticipating events in the future that you have no control over. So in essence, you say, well, how do you really solve anxiety for the most part? You have to think differently on how you value the things in your life. Now, unfortunately, we have cultures, so everyone's different. So what I value from my culture versus what you value in your culture has totally different importance, right? You could say that, hey, education is important in your culture. Somebody says mine is not. You could say physical appearance is important. Someone else in their culture says not. Therefore, they're not going to be stressed out about finishing school, looking a certain way, presentation-wise. Maybe money is not a huge factor, right? All these sorts of things, but for you it is. It changes over time, right? Because now your students, so say grades stress you out, right? You say, well, how do I go about making sure I'm not too stressed about grades? One, you can be very orderly and study and get the grades that you want. Two, you could say grades are not the biggest thing in the world, right? and that there's a bigger aspect to life. Different approaches, but it requires you to appraise things in a different way, to assign values to them in a different way, so that you're not responding in a way that is stressful. All right, some basic concepts: appraising, responding. So we say stress has a response. There's an external event. We're responding to external things that are happening in the outside world. We have thoughts about them, and then our body responds in a particular way. Too much stress is bad because we say, hey, there's a system. The body has a system. And we say that homeostatic balance, whether you're too up or too down, you have caused a ton of wear and tear on the system. It is related to low immune suppression. So you say, hey, I get colds very frequently. I say, okay, the immune system looks pretty crappy. What's going on? You say, I'm stressed out. We say, okay, that makes sense, right? The wear and tear on the systems allows you to sort of take in virus and bacteria, be very sensitive, and thus you'll catch colds and flus and all sorts of things very periodically, right? We have stressors, the theme, the event, right? Triggers, things that'll trigger your stress, right? Things on the outside. Well, it could be time, it could be money, it could be people, and then you have your reaction. Positive things for stress. Remember, say, hey, it is natural. It is natural. Fight or flight. Stress has to deal with fight or flight. Your brain is constantly processing, should I fight this thing, combat it, problem solve it, or should I leave it, flee it, give up on it, right? So think about that on the positive side and negative side. You say, hey, I'm stressed out on the positive side. I get a lot of work for school, so what I have to do, I have to do a lot more work and sort of energize myself to push through. So you say, hey, I'm gonna fight it, right? I'm going to fight the stress. Or you say flight. You say, hey, maybe I give up on this thing, right? I'm not gonna get up out of bed, right? I'm gonna be lazy, I'm gonna avoid it in some way, right? So we say there is a flight even to that too. Short-term, lived or perceived as challenge. Perception is key. Your appraisal is your perception. Might not be important to me, might be important to you. Might stress you out, might not stress me out, right? Say, well, two different perspectives. One of mine could be age, experience, where I'm at in life. Maybe yours is different. You have no children, I do, so I'm probably stressed out about kids. You're not stressed out about something that's not part of your life, right? Immune system mobilization, we talked about that. Motivation, resilience. Negative effects, extreme or prolonged stress, we say, hey, it can exacerbate cancer, right? Stress is releasing cortisol into the bloodstream. It can cause heart disease, heart attacks. So think about that. The #1 killer in the United States is cardiovascular disease. We say, well, is it truly related to just eating bad? Sure, we could say that. But what's the relationship between eating bad and stress? So at the root cause, you could say the #1 killer in the United States is stress, right? It causes one to behave as a response, to say, I need comfort and pleasure of very poor choices, which inevitably over a long period of time can lead to negative effects in a healthy sense. So we say risky decision making. Stress is chaotic mind. We say it is sort of disassociative from brain and body, right? Your brain is evaluating something that your body is going to respond to possibly in a negative way. So in some way, you have cut the wires, right, between the mind and the body in terms of how you are appraising events. So here we get a diagram. Stressful event, tough math test, right? How you appraise it, your perception. You say, well, this is beyond me. There's a threat. Right? A math test is a threat. Your response, stress to distraction. You are so stressed out you can't even think about the test itself or solving the problems on the test, the idea of the test itself causes you stress because you've perceived it as a threat. So now you can't even focus, right? You've lost complete focus. Right? On the opposite side, someone say, oh, okay, hey, I like challenges. I like tests, right? I like challenges. I like to fight. I like to fight. That person will energize or rouse themselves and become extremely focused with that energy. Right? So we say what to do with the energy. Freud, sort of theorized that stress usually and anxiety is usually some form of pent-up energy that needs to be released. Thus, if you do nothing with it, it's still there. It's going to plague you and be a long-term sort of issue for you. Anxiety is the same thing. It means something that you have some sort of pent-up energy somewhere in your body or in your mind that's yet to be released, and typically you're avoiding addressing it, so therefore it'll always be there. All right, some stressors: catastrophe, large-scale disasters. Right, there's some things out in the outside world that we can't avoid. We had an earthquake right now. We had a school shooting of some sort. Right, immediately we have a fight or flight sort of response. Usually it would be a flight response. Right, we'll run away. We'll try to get away from disasters. Acculturative stress, right? Acculturation. Think of acculturation in any environment. You're acculturating to Concordia University, classroom, professor, things like that. It may be stressful, right? You're acculturating to different loads of work, all sorts of things. Life transition, life changes, right? Maybe by definition, life means change. Maybe we could define life as change. Therefore, if you don't like change, life is going to be stressful for you, right? You won't be able to handle change because life transitions. We have no idea how we'll be tomorrow. Cluster crisis. For those who can handle stress, sometimes there's a threshold. And we say when it rains, it pours. Right? Too many things happening at once can drive us over the edge. So maybe we think of stress as a threshold for each individual, plus or minus, right? Plus or minus a threshold. We say you have your limitations for certain events in terms of how you will respond. Your body will respond. The response is unconscious. You can't do anything about that unless you bring it to the conscious. So truly the only way to sort of address stress is to think about the response, right? If you're experiencing being stressed out, you say, let me stop. Why am I stressed out? Why is my heart beating fast? Why am I sweating, right? We're given this mechanism as a natural thing, part of a system, an up and down system that has a balancing point in the middle. We're given this, it's natural. Nothing we can do about the nature of it. But we can change the part in our brains that causes the reaction, which is natural. Okay? So you have to think, why am I responding to the information? Why am I having compulsion about an event, person, place, thing? Why am I ruminating? Right? Repeating the same ideas and thoughts about the same exact thing over and over, expecting something to come out of it or change. You may have to think about your own thoughts. Why am I thinking this way? We have what we call kind of meta-thinking in psychology. Thinking about your own thoughts. Maybe your thoughts cause you stress because they're negative thoughts, right? But you use the negative thoughts as a coping mechanism because the negative thoughts makes you feel good. Right? And we say we gravitate towards pleasure, even negative. Right? We know that things are bad for us, but in the short term, we'd rather get the McDonald's than have to go order and reserve for a table at a big restaurant. Right? We want that quick fix. Daily hassles, compounded by prejudice and life circumstances. Part of my dissertation dealt with this. it really dealt with how racism, right, for South Africans, right, let's say, most of my research was in South Africa, how racism, systematic oppression, causes you stress on a daily basis, which causes you anxiety and long term, which causes you to have an early grave. So really, in essence, you just say racism causes early death. Systematic oppression causes people to die early. Like, oh well, you could relate racism to diabetes, like racism to heart attacks, racism to gray hair, stress. It's like, that's interesting if you really think about it. That's how profound of an impact daily life circumstances. Maybe we can even do that with bad traffic. You say, hey, you know what? Traffic on the 290 decreases your lifespan by 3.5 years. Traffic in Chicago. All right, we'll end off there. We'll come back to this on Friday and talk some more about stress and illness.